Good evening. Just gonna sit on here for a second, wait for Hattie to get on, and if anybody else wants to join. So thank you, Instagram, for telling our followers all about us. All right, Hattie has joined. There you go. Oh, okay. There we are.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Nice. You see me now, Han?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little slow today, it looks like.
Can you hear me? Okay. It could be my internet. It's been real shitty today, so.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll just have to do our pausing.
So, just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Back to the pausing thing. Well, maybe it'll speed up. Maybe it'll be okay.
Yeah, maybe it'll get better. I'm going to shut my door. I'll be to the outside. I'll be right back.
Very good. Maybe it'll get a little bit.
Excuse me. Sorry, it's a little awkward, but it was a little bit louder than I thought it was going to be. So.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. I would just say to George, it's a good thing I didn't wear my black dress and my red lipstick, because that's what I originally had on today. And I'm like, we literally would have been twins.
This is blue. I would just like to mention this is blue and black. And it's a pink suit. And I like it. It's comfortable. So
very good. We would have looked just very matchy-matchy. So I'm glad I wore something slightly different.
Well done, sis. Well done. But.
And I did have the book. I wanted to tell you, I actually do have like the physical book.
Oh, great.
I didn't know, because I think you listened to it, didn't you?
I did, but I actually do have the physical book as well.
Oh, good.
You know. I have discovered memoirs I like better listening.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you said the author read this one, right?
Well, and that's why I like almost all the memoirs I've listened to are read by, I think all the memoirs I've listened to are read by the authors, and I really like having their voice. I don't know, it just gives it something like special. I am not a proponent of all authors reading their fictional works. There are.
Have you had a few that weren't so great there, Hannah?
Couple. Voice actors have a job for a reason. Let them do their job.
Let them do their job.
But for me personally, and I read like, I don't think I've read like 4 memoirs in the last month and a half or so. And I've physically read 2 of them, and I've listened to 2 of them. And I think I prefer to consume memoirs audibly. So, yeah.
Well, and I do think like having the author read their own memoir, like that is, I think like, of course it's going to like add something like that's like really intangible, right, that no voice actor could really get at, that you'd never get at just reading the book yourself either, right? There's going to be something there, right, that like, right, yeah, absolutely. I can totally understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend in publishing who asked once about like, do you like it when authors read their own books? And I said, only if it's a memoir.
I don't know that I've heard any other authors read their, I guess maybe the stuff that I listen to on Audible is,
yeah,
it's mostly like fiction stuff. So it's usually voice actors.
Yeah, I'm not going to name names.
Okay. But we don't need to name names.
There have been a couple, and they're very popular authors who, in my jaded thing, is like, oh, they just think they know best, right? They know but no, voice actors are a thing for a reason. But
yeah, they really are a thing for a reason. Yeah.
But you know, to each their own.
Indeed.
But yeah. So. Indeed. All right, it is 8 o'clock your time.
Yes, 8 o'clock my time. Yep. Sorry, I was just taking a drink. That's why I wasn't responding.
I feel like the timing got better. It's a little bit better.
It got better. It's sped up. Yeah, it seems a lot better now. So.
Okay. You're a little grainy to me still, but that's doable.
Okay. You're not on my end, so I don't know. And I'm not on my end, obviously, so.
Great.
Okay.
tonight, Biblio Talk. We are talking about it was actually for me, one of my anti-racist book fest books. And then also in kind of honor of AAPI Heritage Month, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we decided to read this month, both of us, Beautiful Country, a memoir by Qian Wang. And Hattie, I'm actually going to let you go first. I think I usually talk first because I always introduce everything. So.
No, yeah, that's cool. So obviously I'm Hattie, she's Hannah.
Right.
I meant to actually tell you that we should just do that at the beginning of each of our things because
we probably should do that.
People that we know have a hard time telling us apart. So if people who don't know us wouldn't stand a chance, I feel like. So anyway, I'm Hattie, she's Hannah.
You do have to literally walk.
We're sisters. We're sisters, but we're not twins.
Yeah.
We really aren't, even though people ask us that all the time. We're really not.
And now that I have twins, everybody really thinks we're twins.
Yeah, and they're really thinking that we're twins now. If they didn't before, they definitely do now. So, way to go, Hannah.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah. So, anyway, yes. So, back to the book. I just wanted to say, I'm Hattie, she's Hannah. And yeah, this Beautiful Country was this memoir by Qian Wang. And Hannah told me about this one because it was on her list for the Anti-Racist Book Fest. I did not go to this particular session, which I'm sure Hannah will tell us about because I think it was a really powerful session. So it was not on my extremely long list of Anti-Racist Book Fest books to read. But I have to say, I think I've read a couple more since then. And this one really, it was so well done. And I actually really loved, I didn't know like how far she was going to take her narrative, like the years, how old she would be at the end. But I found it really poignant that it was really just her childhood. Like she was just a little girl for basically the whole book, right? And seeing the things that we know happen from a child's perspective and understanding these things from a child's perspective. Because I think, especially for Hannah and I, just being, white girls from Iowa, this kind of stuff, like growing up, these are not the sorts of things that we had to process and learn how to deal with as children. And so I don't have any way of knowing of how children process these things, right? And so to hear her processing these really like difficult, this idea that you're illegal, that like that you have to, be scared to walk out your door, and just sort of and then of course the racist things that this little girl is trying to process. Her parents are trying to process too, of course, and help her. But that I think was the thing that really drew me into the book, even more so than anything else, just because it was something that was so unique. I think in a memoir. Oftentimes when we read memoirs, it's like, okay, you get this much of childhood, and then it's a lot of later.
A lot of young adulthood and like that turmoil of young adulthood. And I would agree. I think one of the beauties of this particular memoir is this voice and this perspective of the child that she's able to offer. And I think part of that is because of these journals that she had kept all of those years in whatever form, but like, because of course you and I have talked about this, I can't remember anything that happened like at all as a kid. So I remember I was listening to this thinking like, man, she has a great, how does she remember? But then at one point she does talk about that she has the journal that she's been able to kind of excavate. And I'm sure that, dwelling in that brings up some of that stuff. But, and when you were saying, Hattie, about like processing as a child, I don't know if this stuck with you as much as it did with me. I'm not even sure why. But on the flight from China, the first one, her and her mom bring, and she's talking about the flight attendant and her cake of makeup. And like, and it comes up again and again in different people that she meets, and how she keeps like going. It's like this moment of the first time she's ever seen a woman like that, are made up like that. And then every time it happens again, it comes back to that woman as a flight attendant in that moment in the plane. I don't know, there's just something about that because isn't that exactly what we do as kids, right? Like there's this one weird thing, and then all the other weird things that are slightly like it bring up that first weird thing over and over again. And that moment of deep anxiety and fear and not understanding that she was like living in that airplane, and her mother not responding, and her, what did she say? It was the first time she's ever lied. It was like the first time she ever lied about her mom or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, like this, like, yeah. But it was just such an interesting detail, and you could picture it, right? You could picture the woman.
Oh, absolutely, right? Like we've all seen that flight attendant. I mean, like we've all seen that flight attendant, and that's not to like pigeonhole flight attendants because they certainly don't all.
We've all seen that person.
We've all like seen that person, or that person that like for whatever reason was just different than what we were used to, and then that image and that sort of moment just sticks with us. So I totally understand what you're saying. I think that's so true. Just for children especially, although I suppose it probably happens a little bit as adults, but we've just been exposed to more. So
I suppose
there's fewer things that are jarring.
That jarring.
For better or worse.
For better or worse, right?
Yeah.
But I do, I mean, and I think, speaking of the Anti-Racist Book Fest, so the session was called and was in like, quote, parentheses, thank you, parentheses, undocumented truths. And it was Qian Julie Wang, and it was Marcelo Hernandez Castillo who wrote, and he also wrote a memoir. This is one of the other memoirs, and I read this one in paper, called Children of the Land. And he is from Mexico, and a Mexican immigrant. His family, and this is his story of family, like generationally, which is a little different than hers. Hers is very like her particularity. I mean, and he is talking about his particularity too, but there is a generational story within it as well. But they both were speaking, and during the session, it was a really powerful and beautiful session in like the level of vulnerability. And I think we're still, for those of us who don't live in the undocumented community, don't quite understand what that feels like or what that looks like, even when people are quote unquote safe, to go against this idea of silence for their whole lives and to expose and what that looks like and what that feels like. And she made a comment, Qian did, on that at the end, that she's been doing speaking engagements on this book since it came out, and I think it was very well received. And she said that was the first time she's been doing speaking engagements as a woman, and women's different things, as an Asian American and as an immigrant, but it was the first time that she'd ever done it with someone who was also undocumented and lived that experience. And there was such power and potency in that, knowing that this other person knows you and like knows what that feels like in a way that, and like what the cost of speaking and the cost of telling these stories is to not just themselves, but their families, and like how deeply important they know it is, and also how hard it is, because it's going against everything that they've been, the choices they've made up until that point. So it was a really vulnerable and beautiful conversation between the two of them, about what that journey has been like, both from their memoirs and their childhood, and then also this journey of becoming spokespeople. I think that's maybe not the greatest word. That's not quite what I mean, but at least symbols of this undocumented community for the greater public. So yeah, and I would highly recommend Marcelo Hernandez Castillo's memoir as well. He's a poet at heart, which is after my own heart. I do love me some lyrical prose. So if you are a lyrical prose person, Hattie, I don't know, you would like it just fine. But
I'm sure I would. Yeah.
It would not maybe be quite as like, oh, he writes beautifully that way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just going to say just sort of about this idea of being, you know, a spokesperson,
Right.
which is definitely not the right language that we're sort of looking for there. But the thing is I do think these stories really run the risk of being lost forever because of the culture out of which they're coming, right? Because they're coming out of this culture of having to be silent, right? I mean, this is literally a silent culture out of necessity, right?
Like the wider culture has made that a requirement to survive.
Yep, exactly. And as a historian, that is tragic. I mean, it's tragic as anything, as a human, right? This is a tragedy that these people's stories are being lost. And not only are they being lost, but then they're not even being understood or acknowledged as an experience of humans, right? Because of this silence that has been demanded
imposed
of
upon,
them. And that these stories of suffering and of silence, they need to be told, you know. And so authors like this, like Chen Julie Wang and
Marcelo Hernandez.
I think that is part of why, like, being able to be in that session and have those two be able to like know that they had this shared experience was so huge for them. When you're being forced as a 6-year-old, and you know, and he was probably a child that, you know, as well, obviously he was a child, but I meant like when he came to the United States, but as an undocumented person, and being a child and being forced into that silence, like, but then being able to actually not be silent with another person who knows what that meant to, you know, that I'm just like, you just like thinking about it and like sitting in it, like as I'm saying it, like that had to have been really powerful for them to be in conversation with one another in that way. So they're powerful stories, and they need to be told. And there is a whole swath of people in this world who need to understand that these are real stories from real people, from little 6-year-olds, you know, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, who are living this daily.
And I rarely say this, but like literally politics aside on some of this, and you can have and there should be, and there needs to be complex and complicated conversation around global migration and refugees and immigration. Like that is needing to happen, but I don't know if it's set it aside. I'm not sure that's quite the right word, but regardless of some of those conversations, to open and experience this person in their truth and in their and we all have lives that are right and wrong, and you know, and like, you know, we could all pull those apart, those particular threads of like whatever, and how society views us and whether that's right or wrong. And I mean, we're going to probably talk about this in a minute around about women and how we're treated in the world. So like, you know, but there's always that, but to be able to pause that button, if that's what you need to be able to do, to be able to hear these stories, to see the humanity. And again, what you come out from that is what is your experience of that. But to value the story itself and to value the experience, the lived experience of what this is, because it is being lived. I think, I think for both of us, and I'll speak for both of us, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think for both of us, that's the power of books. Like that, whether it's fictional or not fictional, you know, or non-fiction, you know, whether it's a memoir or like even the book Infinite Country, which we also read, which is also there's about an immigrant family, and they're all in different states of documentation. Which he did deliberately to kind of like show the complexity of what that looks like for people.
The greatness of it.
And you know, and I think that there's stuff to be understood and lived through and felt from the lived experience. So anyhow.
Well, I think like culturally, we really need to acknowledge that like the lived experience is valid and it actually has immense value. I think like culturally and like as you know, we're pretty great about yay science. It's the only way to know things. It's the best way, you know. But guess what? Like we all have these lives and these lived experiences that shape who we are and what we know of the world. And just like as a society and our educational system needs to honor that and actually hold that up as like, this is a way of knowing and an important way of knowing, not only yourself, but others, through their lived experience.
We could totally go down a rabbit hole on ways of knowing.
We really could. I know, we're not going to.
That actually is a really good, we should maybe do a Biblio Talk though, or some sort of a thing on ways of knowing, because that's a thing that we have been like cultivating for a while.
We would have like stacks of books for that. Like literally, I can think about like half a dozen books like off the top of my head that like helped me like get to that place myself, right? Where not only acknowledging that there's other ways of knowing, but actually like understanding that they're important too.
Right.
You know?
And then this is Robin Wall Kimmerer, this is not me, this is what she says, is that it expands our understanding. When we acknowledge and value multiple ways of knowing, when we say one way of knowing isn't enough, we are opening up the world and the universe and its relationships in a whole new way. So, like, but we won't go down that rabbit hole tonight.
We don't need it. We don't need to do that. We may do a Biblio Talk on that at some point, just because we love
that's a good one
stuff. So, yeah, for sure.
But the other thing that'll get us both animated,
yes, I mean, honestly,
about this particular book, though, is around one of the things and Hattie and I spoke about this briefly before. We didn't get into depth, but one of the things that we both kind of noticed in this is her conversation and her storytelling around what it means to be a young girl in America and how she is perceived and treated and what she has to do to maintain her own physical safety and emotional safety, to be perfectly honest. It's not just physical.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So there's this story that she tells of there's kind of again, I didn't read it, so I don't know if it's a chapter. I think there was like there was like little stories throughout, but then it felt like there was like a chunk at one point.
There was like an ongoing chunk of story. It may have been interspersed in a chapter.
That may have been
the story about the guy who was kind of following her on the train. Is that what you're talking about?
But I felt like there were some other stories around that as well that she was kind of speaking to around like safety for girls and like feeling safe. Yeah. But she tells the story of when she was a young girl. Again, I don't think she's ever older than middle school in this book.
No, not in this book. She's not. Yeah, she's like 10, maybe 12, not even probably when she's on the train doing the story.
And she's in the subways of New York. You know the East much better than I do. I'm like a Midwest girl through and through.
She was just on the L. She was in the subway.
And so, and there's this, and she is being watched, and that wasn't completely new for her. She'd been watched before. She'd had some inappropriate experiences with men who can't seem to literally keep it in their pants. But then she says one of the times that she felt deeply unsafe was this man kept following her between cars, and she would get off the train to get the next train to try and get rid of him. And yeah, I think this continued conversation in American society of how women and girls are expected to behave and how men are allowed to behave towards them, particularly in public spaces. I was telling Hattie, I have a friend who she doesn't anymore, but she would take the bus downtown in the morning for her morning commute. And we were talking about it, and then she likes to read books on her bus trip, and she goes, the problem is sometimes men don't want to talk to her, and it's late in the morning. She doesn't want to be talking to her. It's at the end of the day. She's going home. And they always are asking her to smile. Like, you'd be really pretty if you smiled. Can't you just, I'm just trying to have a conversation. Can't you just smile? like that whole idea that it is somehow the right of other people to expect not only that I speak to them, but that I enjoy that conversation, or at least pretend to, when that's not what I want to be doing, and that I have no right to not do that. Like, that story told a bazillion times over and over and over again in a million different ways, but to the point where this little girl is like jumping subway trains to get away from somebody.
Yep.
And no one feels and for her not to ever feel safe enough to tell anybody, and part of that is the silence of her undocumented status.
Absolutely.
You know, she could go to anybody in authority. I think she made that very clear, you know, even when she was in the hospitals, and like just walking by someone in uniform is very anxiety producing. But even anybody else, like, that we don't create a place where that's safe for a child to say, I think that guy's following me, can you help me? But we've created an environment where a dude can follow a little girl around. That's fine.
Yeah,
that we support.
Yeah.
Socially.
What I thought the really interesting part of this sort of thing, that as she was telling this story, she was very much she was really saying, I mean, she's like maybe 10 years old, okay?
Yes.
On the subway. And she is telling this story, and she's already got a radar for creepers.
Right. That's
at 10 years old.
Right. I forgot about that.
Because she was just reading, and like she just happened to like glance up once or twice, and she immediately knew that this guy, that she needed to get away from him. Right. And that in and of itself like says something so loud and so profound about what we allow in this society, and what we expect women to be able to do to protect themselves. And not even women, little girls. They have to protect themselves. They have to have a finely honed creeper radar at 10 years old.
And I will say particularly girls of color as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And indigenous girls. And like, it's like, keep adding those particular pieces and it gets worse and worse and worse, right? Talk about the missing girls in this country. Anyway, again,
I know.
We could go down that particular rabbit hole.
But yeah, and like the one time, you know, that I experienced, you know, some like male not coolness. I was on the subway. I was in Mexico City. I was on the subway, and dude behind me. This is why they told us before we went, if you can at all, stand back to back with one of your friends. You know why? Because guess who comes up behind you in the subway and does whatever the F they want. It's gross. It's disgusting. And it's not okay. And I was in high school. Okay. So I was definitely like older than her. But still, like, this is the world that we live in. Like, who is okay with this?
I know. And it would be one thing if it was like, every once in a while incidents, right? Like if it was, but literally the culture that we have breeded and that we have cultivated, that we have created, and we continue to, like, you know, this whole idea, you know, rape culture, it's a real thing, people. It's a real thing.
Well, and that's why we have to warn our high school students. They're going to be who are going on this trip. Like, this is what you need to do to protect yourself. This is what you need to do to protect yourself. If we didn't live in this rape culture, right? Like, we wouldn't have to have all these rules that we have to teach our girls how to protect themselves. Like, it's messed up.
Yes.
So anyway, so that's definitely, that was sort of one of those, like, there was about a million sad moments in this story. I will say, like, sometimes I did have to put it down just because, like, the heaviness of it was like a lot, I think, sometimes for me. And it isn't because, like, I didn't know that it happened. It's just reading about it sort of from this, like, 8-year-old's perspective, that it was really heavy at times, as well it should be, because this little girl had a lot of weight on her shoulders, as did her parents, as do all undocumented folk and people of color in this country, for sure. So that all, unfortunately, is very heavy for a lot of people, and they carry it with them every day.
And I will say one of the things that I think Qian Julie Wang did really well as well in this is that she does there is a real interesting perspective shift. I mean, it's her perspective the whole time, but the way in which she interprets and understands what her mother and father are doing and how that undocumented status and all of the other social pressures that they're experiencing in America, having friends, having a relationship, having money, like all of these other are really hard. And I think she does, I mean, it's just a really intricate and kind of fascinating portrait of three different people all living together who experience and I don't want to say deal with, that's not quite the right word I'm trying to come up, but who experience these same situations very differently. And I think she does a really lovely job of like pulling those threads that are different out for the three of them. I mean, and that's like the gift of hindsight, right? Like, you know, as a little girl, she might not have known all of that, but as a grown woman, being able to look back on those words and those experiences and being able to kind of understand and have a lot of, I think there's a great deal of empathy that she has for both of her parents in their own stuff, right? Like we all have our stuff, and
we all have our stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And some of it's really hard, and different kids would take it very differently and would express it very differently. I think she does come at it with a great deal of compassion and a longing to understand, even if it wasn't the best for her in the moment. So, yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
Yeah,
and we're getting close to 8:30, but I just want to say one last thing just about this book. Is I really thought it was very well done.
I'm just really proud of her.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're like wrapping it up. It's like, wait, 3 minutes. Okay, we're getting there. This was really well done. I would recommend it to anyone. I really would. This one, I would not hesitate to recommend to literally anyone. I think it was, she did a great job writing it, and I really do love, I think my favorite part of the writing of this was that she was a little girl, and you really are experiencing all these things that as adults, especially white adults in America, we know are happening, but we also understand them from a, you know, adult perspective, and one who has never experienced it. And so then to be sort of drawn into this little girl's story and she's experiencing it, was just really profound and very meaningful. I felt like,
agreed,
for me anyway.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's one of the first memoirs I've read. I'd have to like, I've read a lot of books, so I'd have to think really hard, but I don't remember reading an entire memoir before that stayed in
my childhood like that.
That she does not get out of middle school. And I think it's a particular gift. That part of it is a really particular gift that I'm grateful to have read. I'm grateful to have heard her speak. If you ever have the opportunity to hear her speak, you can follow her on Instagram, because I did. That's like what I do. But if you ever get the opportunity to hear her speak, I highly recommend it. I think she just brings a real spirit to the space and to this story, and there's a longing to tell it and to have people hear it and hear it as the gift that I think it is, as it's being offered for people. So it is, and you know, maybe I could probably put a whole book list together too of like immigration books, because I've read a lot of those too. So we could maybe probably have work on that sometime in June, because there's some really great stuff out there, fiction and nonfiction, to kind of like give people some multiple perspectives. And and both of us are still like working on like breaking open some of those perspectives. I just finished my first the memoir, The Concepcion, by Albert Maha, who it's Filipino, and I never thought about it. Didn't know anything about this particular history in America. Had no idea about this particular understanding of the immigrant community, of the Filipino immigrant community, and it's been fascinating. So there's tons of stuff out there, but some really good stuff out there.
Yeah. Do you have the date of the next Biblio Talk, Anna? I was just probably you have it written down next to you.
Is it the 12th? It must be the 12th, because the 19th is. This is the beautiful thing about having them on Saturday, is I remember all my Sundays.
You remember the Sundays? No, I think you're right, because it's the Sunday after you get back from your retreat.
Correct. Yeah, it's June 12th.
What were we?
Yes, it's going to be.
Yeah, what were you talking about? Books. Just what we're reading.
We're talking about what we're reading. Yeah.
What we're reading at the time. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. So June 12th, Sunday night. Yeah. Same time, same place.
And if we have started a monthly newsletter, so if you would like to subscribe to that, you can just go to www.thebookwar.com and you can just sign right up. You can also sign up through the link in our bio on the Book War here too on Instagram. And on Facebook, there's a link to the website. Click on it and you'll get a nice little pop-up thing for you to ask you to subscribe. And it's just a monthly newsletter, just kind of telling you what we're reading, what we're hoping to read, what recommendations, that sort of stuff. So it's not super long. So
not super intense. Yeah, just a little update on what's going on.
We are looking forward to June. We are jumping into Pride Month. It is Pride Month.
That's right, we are.
Yeah. So all book recommendations of those written by or for or about the LGBTQ community are appreciated. Always want to get that list going. So I think there'll be on June 1st. That's what I was thinking about. I scheduled one to come out on June 1st. So wait till June 1st and then you can add it to that. There you go. But anyway, so.
There you go. All right.
All right. Anything else, sis?
Nope. I think we're good. I was just going to say, okay, Hannah, let's wrap it up.
Wrapping it up. Thank you.
Wrapping it up.
Thank you for joining us whenever you're able to join us. And we hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy reading. And
and have a blessed Memorial Day tomorrow.
Yes. Peace. Absolutely. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.